This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jill Newbronner. Here are tonight's top stories from East Asia. The US pledges $500 million in military funding to the Philippines amid Washington's growing concern over what it calls Beijing's rising actions in the South China Sea. Taiwan's president warns of China's threat to the world as he pushes the island towards defensive self-reliance and foreign arms purchases. Taiwan also saying it reaches an agreement with China after months of negotiation over the deaths of 2 Chinese fishermen in the Taiwan Strait. Australia's foreign minister condemning North Korea's risky partnership with Russia, calling their closer cooperation destabilizing. And China's top leadership vows to step up economic policy support for the rest of the year, as lagging domestic demand could scupper efforts to meet the annual growth target. Ahead on East Asia Tonight, Japan struggles to find a suitable spot to dispose of radioactive waste. Now, that's a byproduct of nuclear power generation. Could a solution be in sight? We delve into one such possibility with our correspondent. The U.S. is set to provide up to $500 million in military aid to the Philippines amid ratcheting tensions between Beijing and Manila over disputed waters in the South China Sea.
We're now allocating an additional $500 million in foreign military financing to the Philippines to boost security collaboration with our oldest treaty ally in this region. Both of us share concerns, and many other countries in the region share concerns as well, about some of the actions that the People's Republic of China has taken, escalatory actions in the South China Sea, the East China Sea, and elsewhere.
This level of funding is unprecedented, and it sends a clear message of support for the Philippines from the Biden-Harris administration, the U.S. Congress, and the American people.
Our alliance is robust, multifaceted, and serves the greater regional interests.
Well, we have more now from CNA's Buena Bernal. She's joining us live from Manila. Buena, tell us first how big a boost this $500 million is for the Philippines.
The way U.S. Secretary of National Defense Lloyd Austin III described this $500 million investment to help modernize the Philippines Armed Forces and the Philippines Coast Guard is that it is a, quote, once-in-a-generation investment, unquote. But he also carefully phrased that commitment to say the U.S. Department of National Defense will work closely with the U.S. Congress in order to ensure the delivery of this foreign military assistance. Now, naturally, the question that surfaced here is how credible this commitment will be in case of a leadership change come the U.S. elections late this year, to which U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken explained that this commitment actually has bipartisan support. Secretary Austin also reaffirming the U.S.'s ironclad commitment to the Philippines being its oldest security ally in the Indo-Pacific and the United States being the Philippines' sole military treaty ally. Now, even in past U.S. elections, observers have actually already argued that a change in leadership or even policy direction in either countries, whether the Philippines or the United States, will not significantly diminish the strength of that military partnership. And the reason for that is because both countries have already established cooperation at the mid-level because of how long that alliance has been. The two countries have a 1951 mutual defense treaty, which has a commitment that an attack on one is an attack on either, and the two countries' soldiers have also fought alongside each other in the Korean War, World War II, and Vietnam War. Now, the United States also vowed that it will double its investments to the sites covered by the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. This is another military deal between the two countries that allows U.S. access to Philippine bases through the construction of U.S.-funded facilities for the Philippines' use. And the Philippines Secretary of Defense Gilberto Teodoro Jr. explaining that the $128 million investment of the United States to EDCA sites this year will also assist in the Philippines' civil defense in terms of humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations, the Philippines being the most typhoon-prone country in Southeast Asia. He also explained that the $500 million commitment for foreign military assistance from the United States to the Philippines will help the country ensure a minimum credible defense posture, which is basically how security observers call a country being able to effectively ward off intruders or any unlawful aggression. Of course, back during the Duterte administration towards its end, the former Philippine defense chief actually said that the Philippines has only achieved a quarter of that goal.
Clearly understood. Bueno, the U.S. Foreign and Defense Secretaries also met with the Philippine president. What was on the table for that discussion?
The two visiting high-ranking U.S. officials extended their sympathies to the Philippines for casualties during the flooding brought about by the southwest monsoon, enhanced by Typhoon Gamy, local name Typhoon Karina. But President Marcos also thanked the two U.S. officials for what he said was this open line of communication that the two countries had. And this open line of communication, he said, allowed the two countries to have a more agile security alliance. He also said that this open line of communication allows both countries to continually examine and re-examine their cooperation. He specifically cited the West Philippine Sea, which is how the Philippines calls its maritime zone in the larger South China Sea. Now, of course, this comes the week of a war of words between the Philippines and the United States over disagreements as to what exactly is part of a provisional agreement between the two countries in terms of rotational and resupply missions of the Philippines to Second Thomas Shoal, where the Philippines has a military outpost. China saying that it has been given prior notice by the Philippines before these operations are carried out, and the Philippines calling that a mischaracterization.
Always appreciated, Buena Bernal, reporting live there from Manila. Now, Mr. Blinken's visit to Manila has, however, sparked protests. Dozens gathered outside the military headquarters where the top U.S. diplomat met with Filipino officials. Groups burned a mock U.S. flag and condemned the meetings, saying they provoked further tensions in the region. These are the first 2+2 meetings hosted by the Philippines amid maritime tensions over competing claims in the South China Sea.
We condemn this so-called 2+2 meeting between U.S. and Philippine officials because we believe it will further the military intervention of the U.S. in the Philippines. It will lead to intensified basing of the U.S. in the Philippines. It will heighten tension in the region. The U.S. is putting forward an agenda that is contrary to our stand for peace and freedom in our country.
Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong will meet with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken as part of the Americans' two-day official visit starting today. Singapore's Foreign Affairs Ministry says Mr. Blinken will also meet Senior Minister Lee Hsien Loong and Foreign Affairs Minister Vivian Balakrishnan. He is also set to co-chair the U.S.-Singapore Critical and Emerging Technology Dialogue with U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Dr. Balakrishnan, and Singapore's Digital Development and Information Minister Josephine Teo. Taiwan President William Lai has vowed to boost the island's defense capabilities as the leader warned of what he perceives as China's threat to the world. He was addressing a group of visiting lawmakers from more than 20 countries at a forum in Taipei focused on how democracies should approach Beijing. Amid ongoing mutual mistrust between China and Taiwan, practical matters on the ground are still being addressed. Both sides on Tuesday reached a deal over a February incident which saw the deaths of 2 Chinese fishermen. They drowned after their boat capsized during a chase by the Taiwanese Coast Guard. The incident took place in waters off Kinmen, which is just kilometers from the Chinese mainland. The agreement breaks a political stalemate and could help dial down tensions in the Taiwan Strait. Both sides agreed to compensate the victims' families and repatriate the bodies. China's Coast Guard has since been regularly patrolling the Taiwan-controlled Kinmen Islands, and Taipei has in turn repeatedly driven away Chinese Coast Guard vessels in the region. Let's get more now from Victoria Jen joining us live from Taipei. First of all, Victoria, what are the key points that both sides agreed to or finally agreed to?
Well, it's been 5 months since the incident occurred, and at least 15 rounds of talks have been held to finally, for the 2 sides to reach a consensus. So a lot of efforts has been put in on both sides of the strait, because keep in mind that China has cut off all official exchanges between the 2 sides since 2016, when the pro-independence DPP came into power. So even though Taiwan officials said that this is not an official meeting, but it's a rare occasion for both sides, officials from both sides of the straits to come under one roof. And now, based on the consensus that Taiwan has agreed to return the bodies of the 2 dead fishermen and also the boat that was involved in the incident. And also Taiwan has agreed to compensate the families of the deceased. Now, they have declined to say exactly how much they were going to compensate the families, but so far media reports have speculated that it's about $180,000 US per person. Now, since the incident, China has been increasing its coastal patrol around Taiwan, and this has escalated tensions across the Taiwan Strait. Now that a consensus has been reached, whether or not the tensions will ease will be closely watched.
Victoria, as you said, a rare occasion for the 2 sides to come under one roof, but there must have been some sticking points to the agreement, given that, as you mentioned, it took 5 months to come to this point.
Well, you're right, but I think the most important point right here is that the incident, how is it affecting the cross-strait relations going forward? Now, the consensus clearly suggests that Taiwan is showing a goodwill gestures towards China, and it has pretty much accepted almost all the terms that China has made. But now the question remains whether or not China is going to reciprocate Taiwan's goodwill gesture. And we are watching very closely, especially we know that there are still 5 fishermen from Taiwan that are currently being detained in China for alleged illegal fishing in Chinese territorial water earlier this month. And also we need to watch closely is whether or not China is going to ease the ban on Chinese tour groups to visit Taiwan. Now, if both sides are willing to take a step back, and we're likely to see a silver lining in cross-strait development, but the reality of the matter is that China is unlikely to reduce political and military pressure on Taiwan because President William Lai, his hardline pro-independence stance is going to continue to make China angry. And we have seen military incursions increasing around Taiwan. And so unless he was willing to change his position, we are expecting to see more tensions across the Taiwan Strait.
All right, Victoria, we'll leave it there for now, but appreciate that assessment, Victoria Jen in Taipei. Coming up on East Asia tonight, the Italian Prime Minister makes the relaunch of trade ties with Beijing a top priority as she winds down her first state visit to China. Chinese EV makers reportedly captured nearly 11% of European electric car markets in June as they rushed to beat stiff EU tariffs that took effect early this month.
Young people in Japan are lonelier than ever.
自殺の数が増えるとか、不登校のや DV の数が増えるなどの様々な数字の悪化が見られました。
What is behind this social isolation?
家帰ってからもなんかもう一点をずっと見つめるみたいな。
You keep having this sense that you do not belong to the society.
Young and lonely in Japan. Insight, Thursday on CNA.
The smell is really strong, so it will always affect our sleep. Really bad until I got migraine.
There's a Samsung phone. I'll try to plug it up, see whether it works or not. I'm not sure when was the last time she used this.
Population of Singapore will continue to age. The numbers of older persons living alone is also increasing. So I can predict that the numbers of such deaths might go up.
Once it is a police case, usually you expect that it will be dragged for a while. The body start to decompose, so any touches on him, it will damage actually his skin.
We work with patients who are at risk of dying alone. We want to set up a support for them.
Watch Dead Alone in Singapore on demand at cna.asia.
Females have a hard time accessing healthcare in India.
当下全球的债务已经到了100年来最高的程度。
Why are India's mountain towns collapsing?
Thailand has been flooded with demand. There's no doubt about it.
The main issue will be the race against time.
Thường sẽ đem các đối tượng vi phạm vào rừng xâm nhập và đỡ đi.
The negotiation is a game of expectations. I mean, what's the value of a human being?
Millions of women are really undergoing unnecessary C-sections.
Vaping is now a cultural phenomenon.
Every generation has got its memories, its core.
Discover amazing journeys.
What we do is highly classified and involves large sums of money.
Rebalancing trade with China is a top focus of Italian leader Giorgia Meloni. Now, she's in Beijing to boost cooperation with the world's second largest economy as she seeks to recover from pulling her country out of China's flagship Belt and Road Initiative over a lack of economic benefits. Now, Ms. Meloni highlighted that Italian investment in China is 3 times that of Chinese investment in Italy, and that she wants to remove obstacles to allow more Italian products to reach China. And while the Italian leader says China's economic support of Russia's war efforts against Ukraine is a source of, quote, great fiction, Ms. Meloni also noted that China could be a key player in the Ukraine peace process by helping identify elements of what she calls a just peace. In Ms. Maloney's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping yesterday, she said her country can be a bridge to better trade relations between China and Europe. Mr. Xi highlighted the long bilateral history, urging Rome to uphold the spirit of the old trade route and view ties from a historical perspective. A 4-day trip to Beijing ends tomorrow. Well, it is over to Olivia Mazuki now from CNA's Business Desk. Now, Liv, you've got the highly watched Politburo meeting in China. That's just finished. What's the latest?
Well, Jill, yes, it just wrapped up, and it comes with a series of announcements to stimulate growth. Firstly, the Communist Party pledged to make boosting consumption a greater focus. It will also ramp up support for the wider economy. That's the agreement top leaders reached at the meeting of the 24-member decision-making body led by President Xi Jinping. Weak domestic demand could make it tricky, though, for authorities to engineer growth that meets the annual target of around 5%. For more now, our China correspondent Olivia Seong joins us live from Beijing. Ollie, let's start with the significance of this Politburo meeting. We know that supporting economic growth is the main priority, but are there more details from the meeting that you can share with us?
Well, we have to note that this is a regular mid-year review that is done by the Politburo of the ruling Communist Party every year. And the overall assessment given, if we were to read that state media report, is that the economy has been generally stable and that progress has been made since the beginning of the year, but also acknowledgement of the challenges that China's economy is facing. It has stated that China faces more adverse impacts from changes in the external environment, and particularly one big challenge is weak domestic demand. But what also has had observers taking notice in this state media report is a vow by the Chinese leadership to put in place macroeconomic policies, which it says should be continuously exerted and more powerful, and also mention of a new batch of incremental policy measures that should be launched as soon as possible. But of course, we do not have any further implementation of policy details from this document so far. This comes also just shortly after the Communist Party held its closely watched third plenum, which was reform-focused and had announcements on how China plans to boost its economy in the long term, talking about boosting innovation. In this document from this Politburo meeting, saying that it is necessary to prevent vicious competition among companies in emerging industries. And one analyst I spoke to said that there are no huge surprises here, but what's clear is that the Chinese government is saying that it must hit its economic growth target for this year of around 5%, saying that it unswervingly needs to complete the annual economic and social development goals that have been set out. And we do know that in Q3, we saw a weaker than expected 4.7% growth. Olivia.
Ollie, I'd like to circle back on the fact that domestic challenges still persist. Among the top risks that China is grappling with is the insufficient domestic demand. So what are the specific policies rolled out to shift the focus more towards boosting consumption?
Well, Olivia, I think we have to note here also that what is coming out from this meeting are rather broad directions and messaging that we are seeing. It clearly is a top priority for the Chinese leadership, saying that it is necessary to expand domestic demand with a focus on boosting consumption, including in areas like culture, tourism, child and elderly care. And the focus on economic policies should be more on benefiting people's livelihoods, as we do know that previous measures to try to boost domestic consumption, getting people to spend more here, including trade-in programs, for example, for equipment and household appliances, don't seem to have had a huge impact, or as much as the Chinese leadership would have liked to boost China's economy. And some observers also felt that the third plenum document had been short on policy specifics. But one economist I spoke to did say that in the coming months, we could see policy announcements and possibly also mention version of what China did last year as well. We could possibly, he thinks, see a mid-year adjustment to the budget being announced. The fiscal budget deficit this year was set at around 3%, but he thinks this could increase to 3.8% to give China's economy a boost, as we have also seen in this Politburo meeting talk about the need to speed up the issuance and use of special bonds and the use of a variety of monetary policy tools. Olivia.
All right. Thank you, Olivia Seong, our China correspondent, live from Beijing. Let's turn our attention to market reactions. Now, greater Chinese stocks not reacting positively to today's Politburo's pledges, given the lack of detailed stimulus measures. All the key benchmark indices ending in the red, with Hong Kong's Hang Seng there, the biggest loser, tanking by more than 1.3%. Now, Chinese EV makers rush to Europe in a bid to beat stiff tariffs from the bloc. Chinese brands reportedly made up 11% of the total EU's EV markets in June. And that is driven by a rush to get past new import tariffs that took effect early this month. A record number of more than 23,000 Chinese EVs were registered across Europe last month. And that represents a 72% jump from May, and is twice the gain in European EV registrations for the same period, as AIC Motor led the charge with its MG4 hatchback model hitting record sales. Despite the bumper sales, questions remain whether the momentum can be sustained given the rising costs as a result of the new tariffs. The EU's provisional charges impose an additional 38% levy to SAIC, while BYD will pay an extra 17% on the existing 10% customs duty. The new tariffs will also apply to Western brands that manufacture their cars in China, including Volvo, BMW, and Tesla. Car makers are in a race to build EV factories in Europe in order to dodge those tariffs. India says it's not rethinking the issue of allowing Chinese investments into the country. And that's despite a recent government economic survey which recommended that India focus on direct investments from China in order to boost exports and narrow its trade deficit with Beijing. India tightened its scrutiny on Chinese investments following clashes in their Himalayan border in 2020. The conflict is yet to be resolved. Delhi's annual survey in July noted that the US and Europe are shifting their immediate sourcing away from China, making it more effective to have Chinese companies invest in India and then export the products to these markets. Trade Minister Piyush Goyal says these suggestions are not binding on the government. His comments run counter to a report last week that said India may ease restrictions on Chinese investment in non-sensitive sectors such as solar panels and battery manufacturing. Toyota's global production tumbled in June, down for a fifth straight month, with the automaker hit hard by a certification scandal in its home market and also a fierce price war in China. Output worldwide for Japan's biggest automaker slid nearly 13% on year in June. That is the sharpest decline since December 2022. And in its home market, output plunged also by about 19% after the Transport Ministry found irregularities in applications by Toyota and other automakers to certify certain models in a widening of an auto safety scandal. In China, where domestic electric vehicle makers like BYD have rapidly gained market share and aggressively cut prices, production fell nearly 22%. That marks the fifth month in a row where Toyota's output declined by 20% or more. The automaker is due to report first quarter financial results later this week. A weak yen and robust demand for hybrid vehicles in the U.S. is expected to lift its operating profit. It is a mixed bag of trade across the rest of East Asian equities today, with many taking a wait-and-see approach. The Nikkei 225 and Taiwan's TAIEX managed to end the session with marginal gains following a downbeat morning, and South Korean shares leading the declines in the region on cautious trade ahead of the U.S. Federal Reserve meeting. And that's a wrap in business for me. Jill, back to you.
Thanks so much for that, Olivia. Coming up on East Asia tonight, Japan searches for a suitable site to safely store its nuclear waste in what will be the first of such a facility in the country.
I needed some help. Good thing I knew someone. Or something.
Glad you called, Jay. It's time for an upgrade.
Awesome. I knew what I had to do. Because they never stop. No time to waste. This isn't sci-fi. This is precision AI.
Young people in Japan are lonelier than ever.
自殺の数が増えるとか、不登校のや DV の数が増えるなどの様々な数字の悪化が見られました。
What is behind this social isolation?
家帰ってからもなんかもう一点をずっと見つめるみたいな。
You keep having this sense that you do not belong to the society.
Young and lonely in Japan. Insight, Thursday on CNA.
You're with East Asia tonight. Top U.S. diplomat Antony Blinken announces $500 million in military funding for the Philippines amid what he calls China's escalating actions in the South China Sea and elsewhere. Taiwanese President William Lai warns of China's threat to the world as he vows to press on with a policy of self-reliant defense for the island. China's top leadership vows to step up economic policy support for the rest of the year as lagging domestic demand could scupper efforts to meet the annual growth target. Well, Japan's nuclear waste is piling up, but it has yet to find a suitable site to serve as its first radioactive waste disposal facility. Screening to assess if a town in southern Kyushu Island is suitable began last month. Micho Ishida heads there to find out more.
The rural town of Genkai is located by the sea and surrounded by nature. Many of its nearly 5,000 residents make a living through farming and fishing. Situated in Saga Prefecture in the far southwest, Genkai has hosted a nuclear plant for about 5 decades, and it might one day become Japan's final destination for nuclear waste. In May, Genkai's mayor gave the green light for the town to undergo screening to assess if it is suitable for the construction of an underground disposal facility. Documents describing geological features of Genkai town are collected. The central government-linked body, Nuclear Waste Management Organization, will spend 2 years to study the documents. Then a report will be published, and based on that, local leaders will decide on whether to move on to the next step. The entire process to select a permanent disposal site will take some 20 years. At each stage, the local authorities have the right to pull out. By undergoing just the first step of screening, though, the town can receive grants of up to 2 billion yen, or $12.7 million US dollars. Some local groups, like the Hotel and Restaurant Associations, have pushed for it.
請願が待つ地元の産事業者というか団体から上がってきたわけですね。文献調査を受けるべきだ。そしてそれを議会、住民の代表である議会の皆さんが審議して採択採決されまして。
But Mayor Wakiyama admits to having misgivings. One reason is the size of the town, which measures just 36 square kilometers.
狭いところにはちょっと最終処分場はそぐわないのではないかという自分なりの考えがあったんで、昔から石炭もあったし、いろんな事業者さんの温泉掘削とか。
Nuclear waste needs to be stored at least 300 meters underground for about 100,000 years until radioactivity falls to acceptable levels. Genkai is the third site to go through screening, after two others in Hokkaido, which are still in the midst of the review process. Among them, Genkai is the only site to host a nuclear plant. Residents like Hiroshi Nakayama practically grew up with nuclear power. The 56-year-old runs a farm where he raises 2,000 black-haired Wagyu. The best are sold as premium Saga beef, which is highly sought after. And Mr. Nakayama is not worried that might change if a radioactive waste disposal site is built.
今の日本の技術だと環境汚染はそこまで考えておりません。危ないって言って原発で死んだ人ってなかなかいないんじゃないですか。どっかではやっぱり処分していかないといけないんで、うちは嫌だとか、じゃあどこにやりたいんですか。
Genkai residents traditionally support nuclear power. They reap benefits from the nuclear plant, such as cheaper electricity costs compared to the national average. And the Fukushima disaster in 2011 has not shaken their confidence.
福島でも事故がありましたけれども、それは日本の一部であって、原発と付き合って、いい方向に考えながら、付き合いながら一緒に生活していく。
But half of Genkai's nuclear reactors are now offline, as they did not meet tightened safety standards. Genkai nuclear plant used to supply the most energy of all nuclear plants here in Kyushu. In 1975, it began operation, but in 2015, one nuclear reactor went offline, and in 2019, another did. Currently, there are only 2 nuclear reactors in operation. With fewer nuclear workers coming to town, local businesses are seeing their income decline.
原子力発電所に頼りっぱなしの営業はもうほとんど無理なので、あとはもう他のお客様、合宿とか観光のお客様とかを入れるようにしています。
While a disposal facility could boost business, Mr. Mizoue hopes for more clarity from authorities.
日本が原発に頼る以上、その問題は当然以前から気にはなっていましたけど、なぜ今限界町なのかっていうのは思いましたよね。
Mayor Wakiyama says his decision to approve the screening is not driven by dollars and cents. Genkai receives substantial payouts for hosting the nuclear plant. And he says its coffers are in good shape.
基金も私が町長になる6年前で120億円だったのも今200億円ぐらいまでなってますので、基金だけで、約2年間分のちょっと貯金があるわけですね。もちろん原子力関係の税とかそういったものとあと国の交付金とかで、町は賄ってますので。
Mr. Wakiyama says his biggest hope is that by having Genkai undergo screening, other towns will come forward. Since Japan began generating atomic energy, it has produced more than 19,000 tons of nuclear waste. For now, this will continue to accumulate in interim storage, not safe in the long run. Michio Ishida, CNA, Genkai, Saga Prefecture, Japan.
For more, we have Michio Ishida joining us live from Tokyo. Michio, I want to pick up that last line of your fascinating story, and that is, where is Japan keeping its interim nuclear waste meanwhile?
Yes, Jill. Well, spent fuel from nuclear reactors are removed and stored basically in the compound of nuclear plant. This is also the case at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant where the 2011 meltdown occurred. From the plant operators want the spent fuel to be transported to a separate facility as 80% of storage space is already taken up. Currently, the government is trying to restart more nuclear reactors 13 years after the nuclear crisis. There used to be 54 operating before the Fukushima accident, together supporting 30% of electricity in Japan. Now, as of April this year, there are 12 nuclear reactors operating, and the government wants 20 to 22% of electricity generated by nuclear power by 2030. So this means more nuclear waste will be produced.
Yeah, understand that point. But explain to us why some towns are actually bidding to hold the nuclear reactive waste disposal facility. I mean, do people genuinely feel safe, that the technology is safe? Or is it a case that the economic advantages and the benefits of hosting a disposal facility actually outweigh any concerns they may have?
Well, the number of towns bidding nationwide are actually limited. As the final storage site, we heard Genkai Town and Saga Prefecture starting the screening process, a village town in Hokkaido in its second year of screening. But the whole process is expected to take 20 years if they pass the various stages of screening. They can receive huge subsidy for every stage they pass and pursue screening. And in the end, they even have the right to refuse nuclear waste after receiving the funds. As to Mutsu City and Aomori Prefecture, Japanese media say there is no opposition heard from residents to host an interim storage site. And the entire Aomori Prefecture relies on subsidy from hosting nuclear-related facilities. It's one of the prefectures with the lowest tax income. And Aomori hosts 3 nuclear plants, including 2 under construction. Jill.
Accidents can still happen, Michio, no matter how careful we are. Talk to us about the potential of the effects of storing nuclear waste, the waste part of it, not just on the people, but on the wildlife, on the agriculture.
Well, the storage sites, they have to be safe and secure. That's a prerequisite. They are not supposed to affect people and wildlife. And so they were kept in nuclear facilities. Now, regarding the interim waste disposal site in Mutsu City in Aomori, its structure is made of reinforced concrete, and spent fuel stored inside nuclear plants will be transported in sturdy casks and stored. And for this fiscal year, we've been hearing that 12 tons are expected to be transported there from Kashiwazaki Kariwa plant from Niigata Prefecture, which used to supply enormous power, or 8.2 million kilowatts, mainly to the Tokyo area. None of the 7 reactors are operating after the Fukushima disaster. Mutsu City in Aomori is supposed to store spent fuel up to 50 years. But the big question is, where will they go after 50 years? One possibility is to the final waste storage sites. And as we just heard, currently there are 3 candidates, Genkai and a town and village in Hokkaido. Another possibility is to deliver to a fuel processing plant in Rokkasho village in Aomori, and there remove uranium and plutonium for reuse in nuclear reactors. Now, Rokkasho plant was supposed to be completed by 1997, but its operator has been delaying its operation. So the future of nuclear waste is at this point in time not clear.
Interesting that you mentioned that there's been one delay after another. Seems to have been quite a transparent process, but have the authorities been forthcoming about how they are going to mitigate such potential accidents to ensure that the nuclear waste is stored safely?
Well, authorities, before deciding on nuclear waste storage is undergoing a number of screenings. So that's what's taking place at Genkai Town. Various stages are being looked at, whether the land is safe, whether there's any fault underneath. So these safety measures are taken. And, the nuclear watchdog in Japan, they have actually stepped up safety measures since the Fukushima nuclear accident. Japan has certainly learned from this devastating incident, which happened in 2011.
All right, many lessons learned. Appreciate that. CNA's Michio Ishida reporting to us live from Tokyo. Coming up on East Asia tonight, at least 4 dead in southern China in the aftermath of Typhoon Gemi.
On 4th July, BYD opened its first plant in Thailand, the biggest automobile production base in Southeast Asia.
As the world is moving towards the electrification, Thai government has strong intention to make Thailand become a world-class EV production hub.
Thailand's electric dreams. Wednesday on CNA.
I salute the 80 officers and troops who exercised the greatest restraint amidst intense provocation. We remember that on June the 17th, we made a conscious and deliberate choice to remain in the path of peace.
The United States defense commitments to the Philippines are ironclad. They're ironclad.
确有个别国家在外部势力的煽动下，毁弃双边的约定，违背自身的承诺。
I don't think China wants a conflict. The U.S. certainly doesn't, and neither does the Philippines. But accidents happen.
This August, journey through stories of triumph and unity. Witness the resilience and passion of talented young individuals in Limitless as they overcome hardship to achieve greatness. More than just a cute face, pandas are effective diplomatic tools. Discover how China is using them for goodwill and how other countries are caring for them in Panda Power. What happens when 10 preschoolers interact with 10 seniors? See the results of this transformative social experiment on It Takes a Village. This August on CNA.
Congratulations to all at CNA on your 25th anniversary. I'm sure CNA is going to be the true voice of Asia for many more decades to come. Congratulations once again, and all the very best.
Heading into the second half of 2024, the global economy remains resilient.
You would expect Asian currencies to start to recover.
But there are uncertainties amidst geopolitical tensions.
Unemployment is starting to creep up slowly.
So how should investors navigate? Market insights, optimism and caution in a resilient market. Thursday on CNA.
Brought to you by UOB Privilege Banking.
Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong condemned a military assistance pact signed by Russia and North Korea after visiting the demilitarized zone separating the two Koreas.
We see Russia behaving in ways which are not conducive to peace, but are escalatory. The continued transfer also from weapons from North Korea to Russia is a flagrant violation of United Nations Security Council resolutions.
The security pact she was referring to was the one signed between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin back in June. The two leaders had promised to provide immediate military aid if either country faces armed aggression. So far, Pyongyang and Moscow have denied exchanging any arms. Ms. Wong has met with South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yul earlier to discuss ways to expand bilateral and regional cooperation. Ms. Wong has been dedicating the past week also to meeting with her ASEAN counterparts, as well as those from India, Japan and the United States. 4 people are dead in southern China in the aftermath of Typhoon Gaemi as heavy rains and floods continue to lash the region. Hunan province has been particularly hard hit. Days of wet weather breached major dikes and dams, flooded croplands and damaged thousands of homes and roads. Almost 90,000 people have been affected by the extreme weather. Heavy rains have also pummeled several other provinces, prompting officials to issue warnings and activate emergency plans. State media reported that the government has set aside $33 million for disaster prevention and agricultural aid. Let's take a look at some of the other stories we're tracking tonight. Japan and the US have concluded a deal to transfer Japanese PAC-3 or Patriot missiles to America. This comes after Tokyo revised its weapons export guidelines in December last year. The US and Japan have been accelerating arms industry cooperation since April last year. The number of missiles involved in this export remains undisclosed, but the deal is reportedly valued at around $19.5 million. A Chinese academic has gone on trial in the US for allegedly acting as a foreign agent and lying to authorities. Prosecutors allege that former Professor Wang Shujun collected information on Uyghur and Tibetan activists as well as advocates for Taiwanese independence. He was also accused of spying on Hong Kong pro-democracy activists, all while reporting to Chinese officials. The scheme allegedly ran from 2005 to 2022. If convicted, Wang could face up to 25 years in prison. A food poisoning outbreak in the Japanese city of Yokohama has led to 1 death and more than 140 others sickened. The cases have been traced to a popular grilled eel restaurant chain, Nihonbashi Isesada. The restaurant reportedly sold at least 450 portions of the eel, with allergen information omitted and expiry dates wrongly labeled. Some staff members were also accused of handling food without wearing gloves. That's it for East Asia Tonight for this Tuesday. Singapore viewers, do stay tuned for all the highlights from the Paris 2024 Olympics. And don't forget your headlines anytime. CNA.Asia, Facebook, YouTube, and also X. Bye-bye.